Guys, this Saturday, October 29th, it's going down. Jake the Problem Child Paul, or does he put it before? It doesn't matter. He faces his stiffest competition to date. I'm talking about the MMA legend, Anderson the Spider Silva. Anderson made his boxing debut in 1998. Well, Jake Paul was born in 1997. Crazy, I know. I'm going to talk about that and more right now. Roll that intro. Guys, welcome back to Championship Rounds. It's your boy Marcel back with another one. As always, like, share, comment, subscribe, that whole nine. Comment. I want to know what you guys think about this one because I'm actually pumped for it. I can't wait to see what happens. It's going down this Saturday and I'm going to be, all eyes on deck, eyes peeled to the screen. I can't wait to see how this plays out. But as I mentioned before, Anderson Silva, before he made his illustrious MMA career, before he became an MMA great, he dabbled in boxing already, making his boxing debut in 1998, just a year after Jake Paul was born. So obviously this guy has been training in boxing throughout his career. He's mentioned he wanted to box Roy Jones Jr. in the past. So obviously he thought his boxing was up to snuff back then. And we've seen nothing but proof of that since his MMA, his MMA retirement, if you will, because he's defeated Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. He knocked out Machado Ortiz, and now we're seeing him in there with Jake Paul, who's knocked out every man he's been in there with. For MMA hardcore fans, this one just hits different. This isn't Tyron Woodley, the pure wrestler, who had power in his hands. Yeah, we know you can knock guys out in MMA, but you're not some boxing aficionado as we saw in the Jake Paul fights. The same defense, block high, parry low, it's easy to set up. It's easy to find holes in to land knockout blows. And Jake Paul did just that in the second fight, face planted him. It's not Ben Askren, who was never known for throwing hands to begin with. I mean, the man won the Hodge Award for being the best wrestler in the country when he was in college. I mean, this guy, to say he was a pure wrestler is putting it lightly. No, this isn't a Neeson Gibb, a YouTuber or whatever. This isn't an NBA player. I mean, let's look at these opponents. This man has not fought anyone who has any type of real boxing experience. And now he's fighting someone like Anderson Silva, who not only has that boxing experience, but he will lull you into getting yourself knocked out because he is a tremendous counter striker. And I think that will play a factor in the fight. So I've broken down all of Jake Paul's opponents, none of which have any boxing experience. As a matter of fact, every one of them making their boxing debut. And I think for now we can put it to bed, the thought of him actually fighting or boxing a boxer. This is the closest that we've gotten because, again, Anderson made his debut in 1998. So obviously, this is a guy that's been in there professionally, boxing-wise. We know he's an MMA legend. The odds keep fluctuating and people are surprised. Well, I don't think MMA fighters have made a very good account of themselves, as far as Vegas is concerned. I mean, all we've seen is losses. Obviously, Vitor Belfort did his thing because Holyfield was just good enough he was just stable enough to move around in there. I mean, what did he even throw a punch? We ain't talking about that fight. Triller is a train wreck. But anyways, my point being, why would Vegas put an MMA fighter as a favorite based on how they've performed? It wouldn't make sense. And the voters, you got the boxing guys who have seen what's happened to these MMA fighters. They're obviously voting Paul to win, and MMA fighters who know and respect Anderson Silva are betting him to win. Or those in just the know, or the ones that think they know, because no one really knows how it's going to play out. You know, Anderson Silva's almost 50. Almost 50. So that is a major factor, regardless of what we've seen him do against the absolutely washed Julio Cesar Chavez Jr., who was just a weight bully anyways, who stayed undefeated just enough to fight Canelo, just long enough to fight Canelo in a fight that he was absolutely outclassed in. But we're not talking about him. Machado, that was an exhibition. Tito Ortiz. It was a professional boxing match, but was it? Was it? So at the end of the day, Anderson Silva's looked good, but I think it's safe to say that this is the best informed well, no. I was going to say he was the best informed boxer, but no. Jake Paul, throws big strikes and he's looking straight down at the damn ground. Like, that's going to get you knocked out against a boxer with a heartbeat, with a pulse. He crosses his legs in there. You know what I mean? He's easily to be thrown off balance if a boxer takes advantage of that and maybe sits him on his ass. That's an automatic 10-9 round, or 10-8. Sorry, 10-8 round, or just wins you the round at least. You never know with these boxing judges, you know what I mean? So I'm not going to sit there and count, their scorecard ahead of time. Who knows? Does this fight go to the scorecards? Very possibly. And if it does, I think Silva, even though he's almost 50, I think he will be the fresher fighter, in the long run. So if it goes to a decision, we've seen Silva do that against the washed Chavez and win that. I think he could do the same thing to Paul, and I think he can knock Paul out. But when I was watching the Julio Cesar Chavez fight, and I did a show about that, but when I was watching that, I was like, oh, Silva, like, he looked like he was in the pocket just a little bit too long. And, I feel like if Chavez had, more power, he could have put Silva in some danger. But Chavez, when he was actually a champion, fought at lower weights. So obviously he wasn't able to do that. Was it a split decision? No. Silva should have won unanimously, but again, Chavez Jr. was washed. Anyways, so this one hits different. MMA fans, if Anderson Silva, who some hail, myself included, as the greatest fighter to ever compete in MMA, because it's a three-way tie. I got Silva, St. Pierre, Bones Jones. Those are my three GOATs, at the top. But anyways, heads will fucking roll. Okay, heads will roll. Imagine that. Imagine witnessing all the great things that Anderson Silva has done in MMA. Things that we didn't even think were possible. To, long behold, be retired by a fighter fighting on the undercard, fighting a football player. And Uriah Hall did a show about that too. But get retired by him, didn't really leave the UFC gracefully. They didn't have any type of ceremony or anything. For a fighter as great as Anderson Silva is, that's just a shame. But that's beside the point. The great things that Anderson Silva did in MMA, and how high we hail him, how high we put him up there on the GOAT. It's GOAT status. You know what I mean? GOAT status. For when he was competing, when he was still competing, they were saying he was the greatest of all time. For a reason. Go back and look. He's done phenomenal things. Imagine Anderson Silva, the GOAT, Anderson the Spider Silva, first MMA fighter signed by Nike, Burger King, which was a big deal. You know what I mean? Just Anderson Silva gets knocked out by Jake Paul. Hell no. Imagine that. I don't want to see that. And that's that's large in part the reason why I'm so excited to see what happens. Because if that occurs, that would be crazy. And like I said, heads will roll. Will it affect Anderson Silva's legacy? I don't think so. But I'm sure, in circles and locker rooms and people that care to debate these things, I'm sure there'll be a discussion. But Anderson Silva's almost 50. Okay, so Jake Paul, although this is the stiffest competition he's had to date, this is the oldest fighter he's been in there with. So you go from a YouTuber to an NBA player to a wrestle boxer in the MMA in Tyron Woodley, to a pure wrestler in Askren, then back to Woodley, right? So who has he really? No boxers with any experience. None. You got one now, but he's got to be damn near 50. So, the likelihood of Jake Paul knocking Anderson Silva out, it is definitely, absolutely on the table. But as I mentioned, I just don't want to see it. But I'm going to be watching. So, what would be next? Well, Anderson Silva's this is another thing. Both of these guys want to win, and they want to escalate it into another opportunity, another bigger opportunity. Like I said, GSP has been Anderson Silva has shown interest that he wanted to box GSP. GSP wanted to box De La Hoya. The UFC didn't want to let him do it. But I'm saying that will be on the table. Nate Diaz, free agent, on the table for Paul, obviously, and maybe even for Anderson Silva. His brother fought Anderson Silva in mixed martial arts in the UFC. No contest because Anderson Silva popped for performance-enhancing drugs. He was coming back from a leg break, and Nick Diaz, the older brother of Nate Diaz, popped for marijuana. No contest. Originally a decision win for Anderson the Spider Silva. Not relevant. My point being is that there's things on the table. And if you don't think Uriah Hall or Le'Veon Bell are trying to audition to fight Jake Paul or someone, then you're crazy. Everybody and their grandpa is calling out Jake Paul. They all want that money grab. I'm sure they think they can win, but they want that big payday, I think Vitor Belfort is about to fight Hasim Rahman Jr. I'll be watching that too. Probably going to be a train wreck. But let's see what happens, guys. That's all I got. If Jake Paul knocks out Anderson Silva, heads will roll. And if Anderson Silva finds a way to win or get Jake Paul out of there, MMA fans around the globe will be delighted. They will dance like the dervish. You get the point. You get the point. How you guys see this going? I got Anderson Silva winning by KO. That's how I see it going. The guy is a tremendous counter striker. He will lull you into a sense of security and make you pay. He's made a Hall of Fame, a first ballot if there is one. I know MMA isn't that old of a sport, but if there ever was one, he's made a Hall of Fame career out of that. How many guys has Anderson Silva knocked out with his hands? Plenty. And I think he's got what it takes. If he's still got enough left in the tank, being almost 50, to do that to Jake Paul, whom simply doesn't have the fundamentals. Yes, he cleaned up a lot of things from Woodley 1 to Woodley 2. But when the tough gets going, when fatigue sets in, he reverts back to those old ass tendencies. And if Anderson Silva is still around, if things don't end early, it's going to be a major problem. Thanks for watching, guys. Till next time, as always, stay frosty.